Hey dudes and dudettes, it's me, E.H. Ivins, and this is another edition of The Radical Reset. Today we're going to talk about the President of the United States. Now I realize that this is a, what's the word I'm looking for? More than well-worn trail on which I am treading? I was just studying German a few minutes before I started to do this recording, and so I'm all stuck in tenses and cases and I don't know. Anyway, Donald Trump is, of course, the topic of conversation. He has been since he announced his presidential run. In fact, I would bet everything, and I mean everything, that when he announced for president, he had absolutely no intention of winning. He had no idea he was going to win. In fact, I'll never forget, I don't know maybe if you feel exactly the same way, as you were watching him on the night of the election, and all of Hillary Clinton's supporters were under that glass ceiling in that building in New York. I think it was the museum where that physicist Neil deGrasse Tyson does his broadcast. I forget what that place is called. I think that's where it was. Do not get angry if I'm wrong about that. But anyway, you saw, all the young women in particular underneath all that glass ceiling, and nothing ever happened, and it was all very disappointing. And meanwhile, Trump was being taped in his, Trump Tower condo, which is, I don't know about you, and I am not very wealthy at this moment in time, but there was a time in my life where I was made of money, not billions, but enough millions that it didn't really matter. And I have to tell you, I did not shower myself in gold. I have never understood the gold fixture thing. Who wants to shit in gold? But anyway, having said all that, there he was in his gold shitter condominium, high above the streets of Manhattan in Trump Tower, and the look of sheer astonishment on his face when he won the presidency of the United States was, I think, a moment for history. As telling as Richard Nixon's expression during the Frost-Nixon interviews. You could just see this guy was shocked. Never in his wildest dreams did he think he was going to be president of the United States. So what did he decide to do? Well, novel, because he was never a politician to begin with, and for better or for worse, and you can hate him all you want. Let me stop right here before I go another inch further. I personally wouldn't vote for Donald Trump for dog catcher. I want to make that very, very clear, because a lot of what I'm going to say, because I'm an anti-politist and because I don't belong to the Democrat or Republican Party, some of what I say about him is going to be congratulatory, and some of what I say is going to be negative. And I have a very, I like to think, free thought sort of position on this on this person. But in no way, when I say something, the problem with my Democrat friends, and I have many, many Democrat friends, I live very close to Arizona State University, and Arizona State, like all universities, has its share of, the liberals in the community. And to make a long, and not to mention the Californians that have been transplanting to Arizona to get away from California taxes, bringing their bullshit with them, raising our taxes. But having said that, they also bring their politics, because they don't seem to make the connection between fucking up their state and their prior politics. But I digress. Anyway, I have, if you say anything nice about Trump, they go, but he's an asshole, he's terrible, he's a racist, and look, let us try to calm the emotion. What Donald Trump is a fruitcake. Donald Trump is a fruitcake. In other words, when I was a little boy, my parents every year, and my little sister used to travel from Pittsburgh, where I spent most of the time during my childhood growing up, to Miami Beach, which is where I was born and where I had an enormous amount of, and still have, an enormous amount of extended family. And we would take this trip every year, and we would do it by car. We would get up early in the morning, and my stepfather would try to drive through. Sometimes we would stop in Georgia, but a lot of times we would just drive right through. Anyway, and in those days, the interstates weren't as contiguous all the way down south. So we drove a lot of 2-lane highways, and we would get the AAA triptych, which was, they would, with a yellow highlighter pen, highlight your route, and you would go through all these small towns and all these 2-lane highways. It was really it was actually an adventure. We enjoyed it. Anyway, to make a long story short, one of the places we went through was Claxton. And Claxton, which I believe is in the Carolinas, it might have been Georgia. Was it Georgia or the Carolinas? I don't know. Should have looked that up before I did this. But anyway, Claxton is the home of the famous Claxton fruitcake. And we would stop at the Claxton Fruitcake Factory because we were tourists, and we took the tour of how they made fruitcakes. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with the traditional Christmas fruitcake, what it is about a 5-pound block of sugar, syrup, artificial fruits and nuts. So what Donald Trump is he has a lot of colorful little bits that look delicious, and they're kind of sweet when you taste them, just like in a fruitcake. But when you eat them, you realize they're fake. They call them fruit, but they're artificial. They're not real fruit. That's not, it's these red cherry-looking things that look like cherries, but they're not cherries. Then there's these green things in there that I don't know what the hell they are. They sure shit don't taste like lime, and there's yellow bits, and there's orange bits, and whatever bits they are, and they're very colorful, and they're very attractive, and they're very cool. And people used to give away these fruitcakes, I don't know if people still do this, as gifts all the time. But what it mostly was nuts. Okay, there was just tons and tons of nuts inside of a Claxton fruitcake, inside of any traditional fruitcake. So that's what Donald Trump is. He's a bunch of shiny, tasty little artificial bits sprinkled among a hefty portion of nuts. Now, having said that, he does have his tasty little bits. He has deregulated the economy more than any of his predecessors have. He managed to undo President Obama will go down in history, by the way, and I'm not changing the subject. It's probably one of the worst 2 or 3 presidents in history because he leaves no legacy at all. All he did is give up even attempting to work with Congress, unlike any predecessor. And you can't use the excuse he was a Democratic president with a Republican Congress, because for a large part of the time he was in office, he had a Democratic Congress. He couldn't even work with his own party's Congress, and he started with these executive order bullshit and regulating the crap out of the economy. And the good news of all of that is it could be undone. And America, in its amazing wisdom, elected a guy, accidentally or not, who was very anti-regulation, and he has deregulated the shit out of the economy, which is a good thing. If Donald Trump hadn't gotten caught up in this COVID crisis that we're all living in now, he'd be right now cruising to re-election because he's had the strongest economic recovery of any president, including Ronald Reagan, in memory. And he's done that. And again, I'm talking about the sweet, delicious, though artificial bits that are in the fruitcake. He's done this by deregulation and tax cuts both. Now, he's also been an incredible defender of the American blue-collar middle class. By the way, I made myself some notes. If you guys don't mind, because I don't want to miss anything in this discussion, I have in my hand glasses, and you've never seen me. I have, just as a quick aside, I was born exceptionally nearsighted. I had LASIK surgery done 25 years ago, but now, in my 60s, I find that I do need a little bit of correction. My vision's about 20/25. So I'm going to put on my glasses, and these are bifocals, and the reason I'm going to use these, they're not bifocals, progressives. I'm going to use these so I can look at you and look at my notes at the same time. You're going to get to see me how I look every day on the street, so if you ever run into me, you'll know what I look like. My designer friends. But anyway, so I just have some notes, and I wanted to cover this because Donald Trump is such a wide subject. And one of the things that it's important to understand is that he is, like our Pinocchio president. I mean, the man lies with unbelievable consistency. However, if you really think about it, the reason, or inconsistency, I should say, he lies and he contradicts himself. He tells so many lies that you would think, Jesus Christ, how could any human being, lie so much? But I'm not going to go into this lie and that lie and which lie was and which lie wasn't and get into it. Look, even his supporters know the guy lies. But one of the really endearing things about him is he doesn't feel the need to worry about it. I mean, his lies are lies of narcissism and puffery. Generally, I had the biggest crowds on inauguration of any president ever. That's a lie. He knew that. He knew that looking out at the crowd. Obama had the biggest crowd. Come on, let's be honest. I mean, I don't think much of him as a president, but he drew a motherfucking huge crowd when he was, the first black president in history has been an enormous event of historic importance. And of course, Obama had twice the crowd that Trump did or something like that. Don't accuse me of being a liar. I wasn't keeping account. But having said that, this is the shit that Trump does. But what's interesting and what I've noticed is, as a disinterested observer in the sense that I'm not a Democrat or a Republican, is that when he lies, he does it with such inconsistency that he gets caught, unlike his opponents who lie with incredible consistency. And let's be fair about this. I mean, think about that fucking Steele dossier that the Hillary Clinton campaign, financed, and then it's full of bullshit, and then it gets sent over to the FBI, and then they use it to instigate this massive Russian conspiracy thing. And the people who think Trump loves conspiracies, by the way. Trump, he sees conspiracy everywhere. And the people who voted for him, millions and tens of millions of Americans, you only need to go on social media to understand that we are a conspiracy-loving country. And millions and millions of Americans have what's the word I'm looking for? And buy into this conspiracies about everything, vaccinations and contrails and all kinds of shit. And Trump loves this shit. I mean, the news he watches is not really news. He watches whatever agrees with him, and he gets this very weird. But what's the irony that seems to be lost on the Democrats is that the only difference between them and him is that they're just real consistent liars, and so they're not as obvious. I think they resent him for being so obvious, because the Steele dossier, is the biggest lie of the last 4 years is the Steele dossier and the Russian collusion investigation that wasted, I don't know how many millions or billions of dollars of taxpayers' money to come up with the conclusion that Trump all along was never involved in a conspiracy. There was no cover-up. There was no nothing. It was just the whole shit show. And I think they resented Trump because he gets away with lying, where they had to stick to this consistent bullshit story, even when it was largely discredited. One of the people that I was doing a lot of research about this. Think about, for just example, Rachel Maddow on MSNBC. Now, here's a woman who, to this moment, can't let go of the Steele dossier. Why? Because her entire fame is built on the truth of this bullshit conspiracy theory that has now been discredited by Mueller, been discredited by every reasonable source that's looked at it. So Trump's lies versus this great lie, and Trump's lies don't cost anything. They're just amusing. I mean, he tells bullshit story lies about having, I'll go back to the biggest crowd one just to use, a silly one, but it didn't cost anybody anything. It didn't cause a congressional investigation. Trump is Trump. And I think the political class kind of resent him for getting away with it with his people. But what I think the American people, the 63 million people that voted for Donald Trump, might have known something that the political class doesn't, which is he's genuine. It's not like he's a psychological mystery, right? I mean, the guy, he stands by the promises he made. When he was elected president, he was so surprised that he won that he decided, oh, what the fuck, I might as well keep all my promises. And the guy, even when I disagree with him, like I can't stand these sanctions on foreign trade and the trade wars that he's instigated, and they're just plain stupid. But he does them because he promised them to the blue-collar, hard-working American supporters who are not necessarily PhDs in economics and don't understand the fine nuances of trade protectionism. On the surface, their gut feeling is that we're getting fucked, particularly by the Chinese, and he might be right about that, especially in intellectual property, and something has to be done. And Trump does it. And he does it, this week. And what brought this all to a head, and I know I'm jumping around a little bit, John Bolton's book was published, and it showed Trump to be, basically shooting the shit with Xi Jinping, the fucking dictator of China, and saying, look, if you could help me out politically here, and make some deals with me, I'll help you. And by the way, and this is where Trump gets repulsive. Because Trump is not a reader and doesn't do homework, he does things instinctively that sometimes are just mind-blowing. And at the top of the single worst thing he's done, he doesn't get credit for, if that's the right word, for doing it, which is he told Xi Jinping, if you believe John Bolton's book, and I do, okay, John Bolton, by the way, is a neoconservative. I am not a neoconservative. I'm an anti-politist. My foreign policy, I'll do a number of videos on foreign policy. This isn't going to be one of them, but I don't believe in nation building. I don't think we should send, troops into, Iraq and Afghanistan and any other place to try to build a country that resembles ours, because there's just too much history and too much background, and there are too many variables for that to work. And all we do is end up, for example, in the case of 9/11, to avenge 3,000 deaths in New York, we've lost 15,000 troops nation building in the fucking Middle East, which I don't understand the rationale behind that. Okay, but and Trump would have never done it. Trump would like to get the fuck out of there. And what stops him is the military-industrial complex, and its tentacles. And this is what his supporters see. They see a guy who's trying to do the right thing being hindered at every turn by the swamp, what they think of as the swamp. And the point I make is that even when he's ignorant, but he does things that are damaging because he's ignorant. So it kind of is a two-edged sword. He can do the right thing because he wants to keep a promise. Then he does something this is why I would never vote for him. Here's the example that came out in the Bolton book that completely turned my stomach, then motivated me to do this video. And this is where the fruitcake analogy comes to me. This is where a guy who has a lot of right instincts And the other reason they hate him, by the way, is that he's a product of their community that told them to go fuck themselves. He's kind of like a modern day FDR. I know you Democrats are having a fucking heart attack over this, but FDR was despised by Republicans at the time in particular, and a lot of Democrats, because he came from this patrician background of wealth and power, and he went to all the Ivy League schools and came out and, did everything that he did motivated for the working man, and I think sincerely. Well, Trump is exactly the same guy if you really think about it. I mean, he went to Yale, and he's the product of the Ivy League, and a multimillionaire real estate developer father in New York that went to the best of everything. He's of the class of people that are ruling us, and he's told them all to go fuck themselves, and he stands with the working man, and he's so consistent about it that even when he's stupid, you have to know that he's sincere about it. I mean, through all of his lies, which pale in comparison to the Steele dossier lies, in my view, because of the amount of money and time and treasure and disgusting waste that it entails. Here's a guy that in the end, his supporters know, even though he was of that other background, he still stands with them. So he's a fruitcake, but he's kind of a delicious fruitcake, particularly for the people that support him. But anyway, the worst thing he's done, and by the way, John Bolton, I know I'm jumping all over the place just because the whole thing just fascinates me. Bolton is not a liar. While I disagree with everything he does, he just has no record of lying. Even one of the things that you can knock John Bolton for is that he'll tell the truth even when it's wildly politically incorrect. And so in the book, when he tells this story, and there's no refutation of it that I've heard, there's a lot of, general he's a liar out of the Trump camp, but they don't refute this point. And this point to me is, okay, so there's this class of people in China called the Uyghurs. And the Uyghurs, or the Uyghurs, or the Uyghur, I don't know how to pronounce it. It's Uighur. I'll just say Uyghur. But if I'm wrong about this, please feel free to comment below and tell me how to pronounce this. But the Uyghurs are a Muslim minority in China, and he's got 1 million of them in concentration camps. Xi Jinping does. And Trump says, go ahead. Trump in a private meeting says, if you can give me a trade deal, he literally, if you believe Bolton, this is what he says. If you can give me the trade deal that I'm looking for and help me in my election, and he was explicit about that because Trump does not delineate between what's good for him and what's good for the country. This is something else that drives Democrats crazy, and they're right. He doesn't make a delineation between him and the country. He views himself as the personification of the people that are following him. Therefore, if it's good for him, it must be good for the people that follow him. He makes no pretense of trying to persuade Democrats. That's the other thing. Trump is not a suck-up. Say what you want about him, but if you're his enemy, you're his enemy. It's not like there's a mystery about it, and he makes no attempt to pander to you. But here he's in private with Xi Jinping. He's talking about trade. He's legitimately talking to an adversary, the greatest living dictator right now, a guy who makes Vladimir Putin look like the Pope in comparison. A real piece of shit, this Xi Jinping. He's got 1 million people in concentration camps, Muslims. He's suppressing their entire culture, and Trump literally says, go ahead, I won't say anything about it as long as you give me the trade deal. Okay, that's what makes Donald Trump really, really repulsive. And I think a lot of people, when they voted for Donald Trump, and I know that when he was elected, I said two things. I said, number one, he's my president now. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Number two, I prayed for no major crises during the next 4 years. And had these 4 years gone by without COVID, he, like I said earlier, would have been reelected. But I don't know. We'll see. One of the things that really drives Democrats crazy about Donald Trump, and by the way, guys, I'm going to go after Joe Biden, all of you Republicans out there, while I'm chewing in the Trump. I'll be going after Joe Biden next, and then after that, I'm going to go after Joe Jorgensen, who's the nominee of the Libertarian Party. I won't be doing this in necessarily order of 1, 2, 3 videos. Who knows what will happen tomorrow that I might want to opine on in my next video. But over the next month or so, I will do all 3 of these people who are well, 2 of them are the ones that have a real chance, and then there's the way out, third party. But if any third party is going to win, it's the Libertarians, because they're the only ones on the ballot in all 50 states and well organized and comparatively well funded. And Jo Jorgensen, well, anyway, let's not go to her right now. But I will be doing a video about her later after the one on Joe Biden, which I'll do. I don't know, what my analogy will be. Trump's a fruitcake. I don't know what Biden is. Maybe, demented old man in a wheelchair. He is so, he's so disdainful of doing, see, politicians, because they're about 70% attorneys, for them, there's lying and then there's lying, and there's acceptable lying and then there's unacceptable lying. And Donald Trump is an unacceptable liar because he lies, like I said earlier, with no consistency, so he doesn't have the party line, so he doesn't have the talking points of either party. So you never know what he's going to say, which breaks the whole conspiracy of the military-industrial / democratic labor, that's not a conspiracy, but institutional political class that runs this country, and they just can't stand him. He has such disdain, such open disdain. When he's caught in a lie, his answer is another lie. Where a politician will stick to the same. The point I'm making is politicians are consistent. They lie so smoothly and cleverly, they have us believing the lies. A lot of the things that are said by the supporters of both the right and the left are repeated lies too. There's so many lies. I'll give you an obvious one right now, that there's a systemic white racism within the police forces of the United States. Bullshit. There isn't. That there's, it's nonsense. Or what's another accepted lie? That we need to pump more money to the economy now subsequent to COVID. If we don't, the whole thing's going to collapse without government money and printing fiat currency. These are huge lies, huge, monumentally damaging lies that these politicians tell, and they expect other politicians to go along with it because that's how they maintain their careers of being professional power seekers. Where Trump just is so openly disdainful, he just tells them to go fuck themselves. So he's just not going to play that game. The thing is that other presidents at least paid lip service to, there was a difference between their campaigns and national duty, even though, for example, Obama was all about politics, polled everything, and did everything based upon what would make him look the best. Obama and Trump have one thing in common. They're both glib narcissists. It's just the way they are. They occur differently, but they're the same person. If you understand underlying it all, and all big politicians tend to be glib narcissists, at least the successful ones. The ones that aren't, you just never get to that level. And Obama was but he was good at the game of pretending. So I'll give you an example of what Obama did that was blatantly political that he got away with, which was announcing the death of Osama bin Laden the day it happened. What a stupid fucking thing to do. We had all this intelligence. The other side wasn't sure if bin Laden was dead or not, the other side being the terrorist networks. Rather than keep it a secret and give our intelligence people time to analyze all the intelligence, and I know this, I'm bringing this up because I worked at the National Security Agency and I have an intelligence background. The right thing to do subsequent to killing bin Laden was keep it a secret. No one knew. Don't announce it. Don't make a federal case out of it. You can talk about it a month from now after we analyze all the intelligence that we scooped up during the operation when we killed him in Pakistan. Instead, Obama announces it the next day and makes himself, and then, oh, by the way, accepts I know I'm out of chronological order, but when Obama accepted the Nobel Peace Prize for doing absolutely nothing except being black, that was a real stomach turner, guys. But no one said anything because, it just was part of what the political class was buying into at that time. Donald Trump is so disdainful, so openly disdainful of this, that he makes them stomping, doubling, spitting mad. And people, and they just tell the same lie over and over. Adam Schiff is still telling the conspiracy lie. Rachel Maddow is still telling the conspiracy lie. The left is still promulgating it because they've built an entire infrastructure based on that lie, where Donald Trump, he lies, but he doesn't build his entire life around the lies that he tells. I don't know if you can understand that difference, but that's what drives them crazy. I'm going to wrap this up. I'm going to get down to the bottom line on Donald Trump. Look, that was me shaking the camera. I do that at least once a show. I don't know what the story is with me and that camera shaking. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe I'm getting demented like Joe Biden. Anyway, Donald Trump is the wrong man elected for the right reasons. People elected Donald Trump because they wanted to throw a wrench into the works. And the 63 million people that voted for him, and I believe will vote for him again, vote for him because he is the anti-politician, and they know. And the people that say, like, for example, religious people are hypocrites for backing Donald Trump because he's such an obvious sinner. These are charges being made by people who don't believe in God to begin with. By the way, I don't believe in God. I am a religious agnostic, which is basically to say I'm a pussy atheist. And having said that, it's not like I give a shit about hypocrisy one way or the other. But here's the thing: Donald Trump what gets him through all of this is that, and I know this is going to be a dichotomy, but he's a genuine liar, okay? Say what you want about him, he's genuine. Who you see is who he is. I am positive that if you and I were sitting with him across a table and having dinner, he would spout a lot of this bullshit as facts, and we would probably find him charming and engaging, okay, and an interesting person to be around. I know that I'd like to meet him. Having said that, so Christians, they think everyone's born a sinner, so they're going to forgive him for that, because in the end, at his core, whether you agree with him or not, and I disagree with him on trade, and I disagree with him on most of what he does in foreign policy, and I disagree with him on how he's handling the COVID situation, and I disagree with him on immigration massively. The wall was, come on. I've talked about this many times, and where I stand on immigration and the drug war. And I have chapters about this, by the way, in a Radical Reset, the Manifesto of Antipolitism, which I strongly encourage you to pick up on Amazon so you get the whole picture of where my mind is in talking about this and in founding this movement of antipolitism. The thing about Trump is he's genuine. That's what it really comes down to. He's genuine. In a world of fakes. And while he's a fruitcake, and there are colorful pieces while these little bits are fake, and he's full of nuts, in the end, it's a pretty tasty package, okay? And the people that like it, there are people that like fruitcake, and there are people that don't like fruitcake. And, the reason fruitcake got to be popular isn't because it was foisted upon the American public by the Claxton Fruitcake Company. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Well, the desire for fruitcake. Then came the Fruitcake Company to make all the fruitcakes made out of little artificial bits with lots of nuts. Donald Trump is a really delicious fruitcake to the 63 million people who elected him. And to the rest, and then on the other side of the spectrum are the slightly more people, 64 million, let's call it, of Hillary Clinton supporters, who fucking hate him. And in the middle are the people who aren't sure if they like fruitcake or not. Okay, and depends on what day you ask them. Right now, today, they aren't enjoying the fruitcake because this whole COVID thing has the country unnerved, and they're not sure what to do next. But a week is an eternity in politics, and as I'm talking to you, it's June, and the election's in November, and in the end, I think Donald Trump's going to be reelected. And the reason I think he's going to be reelected is because he is a genuine fruitcake. Just think about it. They're going to run Joe Biden, and the campaign's going to come down to two things. Who can anti-China each other? And Trump is much more genuine on the China issue. There's just too many hours of videos of Joe Biden sucking China's dick. Okay, and so in the end, Trump's going to win that argument as who's going to be tougher on China, because Joe Biden, again, has been sucking China's dick for decades, literally decades, and there are thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of minutes of film or video of him sucking China's dick. And Donald Trump, say what you want about him, is definitely not a Chinese dick sucker. I mean, I don't know what else to say. Having said, and that's going to be a big issue because of COVID, and because clearly the Chinese, whether they intentionally did it or just let the cat out of the bag, foisted this shitstorm upon the world because they chose to cover up what was going on as opposed to dealing with it and cluing the world in, and in freedom sharing the information so we could contain this fucking thing. This has gotten out of hand because of the Chinese, and Donald Trump is going to run his campaign. I guarantee, and he's going to say outrageous fucking things that only a fruitcake would say, but 63 million people, plus the people in the middle, are going to listen to him and say, well, he's genuine. And in the end, that's why I think he's going to win, because real beats fake every day of the week. And anyway, I'll talk about Joe Biden a lot more and his oncoming dementia, but, real beats fake. So, love Donald Trump, hate Donald Trump. Most of my friends hate Donald Trump, to be perfectly honest. My own children, I can tell you, my youngest daughter, not going to vote for Donald Trump. My youngest son, not going to vote for Donald Trump. My oldest two children probably are going to vote for Donald Trump. Again, but they never would defend him. See, what's interesting about the people in the middle, the independents, which is where my children fall, and the people that are going to vote for Trump in the middle, is that they're going to lie to the polls. They're going to tell, because it's so politically incorrect among the general public, and because the left is so vociferous, and because everybody is in the screaming and yelling and no one is talking to each other, a lot of people are never going to admit that they're going to vote for Donald Trump. But I promise you, there are literally tens of millions of Americans who are going to publicly say they won't vote for Donald Trump. But when they're in the voting booth and it comes down to real fruitcake or phony, when it comes down to tasty little artificial bits or tasteless little artificial bits, when it comes down to lots and lots of nuts or it comes down to stale nuts, the same old shit, they're going to pick the fresh, real fruitcake. And with that, that's the end of this podcast. Now, don't forget to, was that a listen, I'm going to blow my own horn. Bet you never heard this anywhere else. Anyway, click on the subscribe button if you would, please. Click on the notification button. Don't forget to go to antipolitism.org and find a way to work with us. Let's work together to really make antipolitism first. Of course, we have to gain traction, which we have not yet, but gain traction as the third way. And if you don't understand how antipolitism works, pick up the book, A Radical Reset, from Amazon. It's free if you're a Prime member on Amazon, and it's very inexpensive if you're not, to get a print copy. And read about it, and then let me have it. Comment below, let me know what's going on, and let's build something together. Because when it comes right down to it, isn't it pathetic that in a country of 340 million people, a country that patents more inventions than any other country in the world, okay, a country who's contributed more to mankind in its history than any other country in the history of the world, a light onto the human race, isn't it amazing that out of these 340 million people, Donald Trump and Joe Biden are the best we can come up with? How is that? If you don't know anything else about antipolitism, ask yourself this: how is it possible that we have our choice between a fruitcake and a man with dementia? This is it. This is what we've come up with. We've gone through this entire process, dozens and dozens of rabidly ambitious people willing to expose their lives to destruction, and we've come down to a fruitcake and a man with the onset of dementia. Okay, and we'll talk more about Biden's dementia and other things later on. But anyway, that's it. Thank you for joining me. Have a wonderful week, and until next time, this is E.H. Ivins signing off.